I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. This is the Making of Mentorship Programs for Apprentices webinar. We're going to have a discussion this morning with three guests and Kaya Apprentice Program directors, I suppose, managers. I am really looking forward to this conversation, though. Three folks that have really been at the forefront of mentorship and how it applies to apprentice programs. So mentorship is, one of the cornerstones of apprenticeship programs, and it's often one of the most challenging components for people to pull together. And so good mentors, however, can be a vital link between industry and educators. It can be a mechanism for ensuring high-quality programming and a fail-safe for apprentice retention. So we're hoping this webinar will allow us to address a few key aspects of quality mentorship, and we're going to have a discussion about the identifying and recruiting mentors and overcoming challenges to a successful mentor-mentee relationship and supporting the key role that mentors play in the apprenticeship training model. My name is Caleb Van Doctor. I'm with Social Policy Research Associates, and joining me today are three guests. I have Jeffrey Forrest. He's the Vice President of Economic and Workforce Development at the College of Canyons in Santa Clarita, California. He's the co-founder of the Strong Workforce Apprenticeship Group, or SWAG, whose mission is to drive the expansion of apprenticeship in the state of California and throughout the country by partnering with industry, education, workforce development, and government. And in addition to that, Jeffrey oversees the Economic Development Division of the college, which offers the following programs to support training and development for companies in Southern California. It offers the Center for Applied Competitive Technology, or CACT, the Fast Track Institute, FTI, the Small Business Development Corporation, and the Employee Training Institute. So Jeffrey has more than 20 years of experience in relationship to building models such as mentorship and workforce development, and his experience includes mentorship training under President Obama's Save Our Sons initiative, and he currently works with a detention center to offer life skills and personal development training for inmates seeking to improve their lives. After all of that, he also advises companies on how to establish mentors with their organization. Quite a lot. Thank you, Jeffrey, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
We also have on the line with us Steve Linthicum. He served in a full-time faculty role at Sierra College in Northern California for 18 years, teaching cybersecurity and business law courses until just June of last year, when he retired, hopefully relaxingly, and was asked to take a role as Deputy Sector Navigator for ICT for Orange County. There, he's focusing on statewide programs for the California Community College Chancellor's Office. Steve also serves as the co-project director for Coastline's Cybersecurity Apprenticeship Program. He holds a large number of industry-recognized certifications relating to information technology and cybersecurity, providing a connection with cybersecurity professionals in his region. Professional connections coupled with his efforts at assisting certification issuance entities to include mentoring activities as counting towards meeting continuing professional education requirements for certification maintenance serve to assist him in his efforts in championing mentorship. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. And finally, we have Dr. Randy Wolf with us on the line. She has more than 35 years of experience in early child care education, family support, workforce and organizational development, and policy and systems change. She earned her Master's of Education in Instructional Leadership at the University of Illinois and a PhD in Human Development and Social Policy at Northwestern University. Professionally, she's worked with preschools, child care centers, and family support centers. And she was a professor in early childhood education at Northern Illinois University for 10 years before moving to Los Angeles in 2007. As Director of Workforce Development at Los Angeles Universal Preschool, or LAUP, she created and launched the Early Care and Education Workforce Initiative that awarded grants to 7 collaborations of community colleges, universities, and feeder high schools aimed at removing barriers and creating pathways to careers in early care and education. And since 2015, she's worked as a consultant to the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU, developing and implementing apprenticeship models for 3 subsectors in the early care and education workforce. To date, more than 350 workers have been involved in these apprenticeships, and plans are underway to expand the program and ensure long-term sustainability. Randy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Or perhaps I should call you Dr. Wolf.
No, you don't have to call. Please don't call me Dr. Wolf.
Okay, we'll go with Randy. It's good. We're a little bit of a family here, so that's wonderful. I also just want to make a quick note in the background with me. I've got my team. I have Jessie Ottinger on the line. She is helping out. She'll be doing leading some of the chat conversations and helping to encourage people to ask questions and facilitate any questions that come up. So thanks, Jessie, for helping. And on the back end, we also have Eduardo Ortiz. So it certainly takes a village to make the whole system work, and we appreciate both of them with us. So I want to launch into a conversation with our guests and actually pose an introductory question really to all of them, asking why is high-quality mentoring important for apprenticeship programs? And Jeffrey, why don't I start with you and ask, especially for your programs and your experience, why is high-quality mentoring important for apprenticeship programs?
Yeah, high-quality mentoring is very important for apprenticeship because it adds value to the overall apprenticeship experience. One of the things that is critical in having apprentices at a company is not just simply meeting out, if you will, the OJT and the related supplemental instruction, but making sure that there is a relationship that is cultivated between the company and the apprentice. There is one very clear reason that I can also speak to, especially for those who are involved in apprenticeship regarding advanced manufacturing, where there is such a shortage of qualified machinists and operators. One of the things that many of our employers complain about and rail about is the fact that once an apprentice or an individual is trained, they generally get poached by another company. And I hear that over and over and over again. And so we have been working with our companies to say to them that those individuals that they're training need to understand that apprenticeship is an investment. It is not a project undertaken by the company. It is an investment in the long-term relationship of that company with that employee. And through mentoring, it does a couple of things. One, it makes the apprentice feel like an employee and not an underling. Second, it demonstrates to the apprentice through the mentor that the company actually cares about their future and about their productivity and about their success. And three, there's the opportunity to build long-lasting friendships. And those three things really help make it more appealing to an individual who goes through the training, and if they are given an attractive offer from elsewhere, they might be less likely to jump ship because they have been rooted into the culture of their existing company. And so that's really why I believe there's a high value to having mentors within a company that's doing apprenticeship.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that certainly rings true, I think, with some of our experiences having mentors. It's oftentimes the relationships, the professional relationships people build that help keep them connected to the company themselves. That's a great point. Stephen, can you speak to that question as well? High quality mentoring, why is it important to apprenticeship programs?
Well, certainly. In our program, which is relatively new, we are about to come up with the 1-year anniversary of our first cohort. And cybersecurity is a fast-moving field, if I had to characterize it. And generally, even in an employment situation with a apprentice and people working around them, they need to draw upon the skills and knowledge from outside their company. And so what we're attempting to do relative to mentorships is to broaden that base of knowledge beyond the employer to the industry, to people that are in an industry and have been in it for a very long time. The challenge associated with it is, frankly, for cybersecurity. To give you an example, there's a site out there called CyberSeek, and it references the fact that in the LA, Long Beach, Anaheim area, there are about 10,000 job openings in cybersecurity. And that's pretty much across the state, that sort of demand, and the demand far exceeds the supply. And so what we're doing is we're reaching out to cybersecurity professionals and asking them for their help. But you know, there's always that, well, what's in it for me sort of thing. And what we've attempted to do, and with success, in this industry, in cybersecurity, a primary credential is an industry-recognized certification. For example, one of the certifications I hold is a CISSP, and one of the requirements for its maintenance is that you achieve a certain level of hours associated with activities, and mentoring qualifies as an activity. We're required to do 40 hours a year. And so what we're doing is we're connecting up our apprentices with those who are who have the certifications that they ultimately want to get to. And you're going to have questions in this world, and the mentors are there to provide a, what's that? There's a show out there, I can't even think of the name of it, where it's like a lifeline. And so the mentors help facilitate answering the questions for the apprentices, because they may well be working in an environment where there's a new question out there, and they have to go beyond the people around them to get the answers. Every day we're seeing new breaches and tools that are used relative to halting those breaches, and it's important that our apprentices have this broader base of connection that goes beyond their fellow employees. So that's one of the things we're doing.
Fantastic. And let me ask Randy also, can you speak a little bit to this too, high quality mentorship and mentoring, why is it important for the apprenticeship program?
Sure, and in our program, and I guess each program is so unique, so the reason, the answer to the question reflects the sector you're working with. Excuse me. So with the early educators, we actually have 3 different models, and one is with Head Start workers who are center-based. They work in Head Start programs. One is with family child care providers who are home-based, and they're actually small business owners. They run small child care programs out of their homes. And the third is center-based preschools that are state-funded for low-income. All the folks we work with are working with low-income families and low-income communities. And the role of the mentors and the significance of it is different in each of these programs, but I'll be real succinct just to highlight it, though. Sorry. In the case of the center-based folks who are working at state-funded preschools, our mentors are actually seasoned early childhood professionals who are themselves working in the field or have worked in the field for many years, but they don't actually work at the center where the apprentices work. And so the reason they're important is because when they come in to provide mentoring, they can model excellent teaching practice and working with children. Oftentimes they have more experience and more skills even than the site director. And so they're helping the apprentices to take what they learn in the college courses and breathe life into it. And often that, we're talking about teachers, and so that requires actually seeing someone do in practice what you've been reading about or discussing in your college classes. And so for those mentors, we actually had to recruit them, which I know we'll get to later in your list of questions. In our second group of home-based folks, we partner with a community-based organization, and the coaches actually are staff members at the community-based organization, because part of what this organization does is offer a lot of coaching to a lot of people doing all kinds of things. And again, the role there is to model and to answer questions and to point out to the apprentice things that they're doing that may not be optimal and that kind of thing. And then in the Head Start program, the coaches actually come from within the program, and so they are the lead teachers and program staff, and so these folks are kind of living with each other all the time, but they get the kind of one-on-one extra attention or extra guidance because they're part of the apprenticeship program that they might not get otherwise. That kind of gives an overview. I guess I would say what's the common thread in all of this is that because we're training teachers of young children, the mentoring plays that kind of a role of strengthening the teacher's skills and understanding and competencies in part by modeling behavior and in part by, you know, sort of sharing their wisdom firsthand as opposed to reading it in a book or taking it in a college course.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like. No, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like, you know, for all of you, the mentors are really helping the apprentices take information that they're learning and apply it into the real world and give them a lifeline into the work setting, so that you know, if they need to pull the parachute line in any sort of situation, they've got somebody there that can help them out with that. And in addition, it really helps build that personal professional relationship with the employer itself. So that definitely seems like a common thread that's coming across through everybody's programs. I want to put a question out to the group and really let anybody answer or let you guys work off one another. How do you each support your mentors in your programs? Like, do you provide training for the mentors themselves? And if so, what does that look like? What kind of supports do the mentors receive from the programs?
I mean,
yes, I'll go ahead and,
oh, never mind.
Yeah, this is Jeff Forrest. I'll go ahead and address that. We have a couple of companies that we work with. One's a logistics company and the other's an advanced manufacturing company that has very strong mentorship programs. And one of the ways we do it is through the HR department. And so as part of our relationship with the company, one of the things we want to be very careful to do is make sure that in all of our relationships and dealings with our apprentices, we work through the proper channels within the actual company. So you have this large logistics company, hundreds of thousands of square feet and lots of customers scattered around the world. And we work through their director of HR, who has put in place mentors for the 22 apprentices that we have operating in logistics. And so we make sure that we meet with them on a monthly basis to ensure that the relationship is being cultivated, that things are going well, and that if there's any supports that we need to give them on our end in terms of training, we do so as well. And actually, we're in the process of developing a curriculum for companies to help them in hosting apprentices, because this is new. This non-traditional apprenticeship model is very new to California in terms of expanding it, and many of our organizations and companies are still trying to figure it out and work it through. And so we're working to make our apprenticeship companies true apprenticeship companies by making sure they understand the relational development that takes place between mentor or journeyman, if you will, in some cases, and the actual apprentice themselves. With our advanced manufacturing company, which is small, there's an individual who we work with to make sure that a piece of what they do in terms of the apprenticeship experience, that there's a high degree of onboarding that takes place within the between the mentor and the company and the apprentice. And so because of the nature of the fact that you've got 15 or 20 employees, that really makes it easier for mentoring to take place. It's much more organic, much more natural, but at the same time, we don't want to make too many assumptions, so we make sure that there's a good degree of onboarding, formal onboarding that takes place, so that the employer understands the apprentice and is able to cultivate a relationship with them, as well as the mentor who's assigned to them or who is willing to take them, if you will, and nurture them and develop them, that all of that is taking place at somewhat of a formal level in terms of introducing them to the company, the history of the company, and how the company does its business, giving them that sense of belonging and that they're a part of a company that's doing great things that add value. Supporting those efforts is what we generally do, and helping companies give that message to the apprentices, and it has been very, very well received. And I would say out of the 30 or so apprentices that we have working, we've had 2 that have turned over, and that's because they're no longer with the company. But other than that, we've had a high degree of retention as a result of that.
Wow, that's great. Randy, did you have something you wanted to jump in on that too?
Sure. With us, we don't exactly train the mentors because, as I said before, the folks that we use as mentors are very seasoned early childhood professionals. But we do provide ongoing support, and sometimes that kind of spills over into training. With one of the groups, the center-based folks, we actually had 2 or 3 meetings before we launched the program, because they were also helping us. It was a brand new program. They were also helping us sort of define the mentoring, aspect of the apprenticeship. And then we meet probably 3 times a year, just to sort of have a place for them to talk with each other and share experiences, get questions answered, and sort of strengthen the foundation of the program. With our home-based folks, where we use the community-based organization staff, we meet with them. I meet with them about every 2 to 3 months. And again, we're going through everything about the program, including the mentor aspect. So if there's questions, if there's problems, and so forth. And in all cases, I'm sort of the hub of the wheel. And so if something particular comes up with a particular apprentice, some problem, some question, whatever, we're kind of in constant email and phone communication as we need to be to sort of problem solve and to brainstorm together. So it's sort of a combination of an ongoing support system with me being sort of the supporter of the mentors, and then also sort of an institutionalized, either meeting every couple of months or meeting quarterly, where the mentors also get to be with each other so they can also learn from each other and strengthen that aspect of it.
That's great, and it sounds like, Randy, you're dealing with a lot of programs that have teachers, so they may, some of the elements of mentoring itself may be something that's within their wheelhouse, I suppose. It might be something that's
that's right.
For them.
Exactly.
Steve, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, and of course, we don't have cybersecurity is such a relatively new profession. We don't have any formal mentoring processes, save and except the certification bodies that will allow mentoring activities to comply with the CPE requirements. But they do have requirements associated with that. And that is that the mentoring activities must be detailed in a sufficient manner and provide accountable hours associated with it. And they have to be effectively signed off by a nonprofit. And the California Community College System is a nonprofit. So I've instituted a pretty rigorous requirement relative to what they must disclose before I'll sign a letter indicating that they have met the requirements. And I think that the whole idea here is to make it meaningful. Incidentally, we have a couple participating entities, one of which is InfraGard. It's an FBI-created organization where the students, we make sure that they join that. And the whole idea with InfraGard is it provides a security check, not a clearance, but a check. And it's an opportunity for the students to attend the quarterly meetings and meet people who are cybersecurity professionals. We do the same thing with regard to something called the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. We ask that the students join that, the apprentices join that. And again, that's an opportunity to participate in a variety of activities. And then we have local chapters of international organizations, ISACA and the ISSA. And we pretty much insist that students start getting involved in those activities. Because what we want to do is we want to encourage our apprentices to get involved in organizations so that they can select mentors that they can work well with and get advice from. Again, it's a revolving field. If you don't keep up in this field all the time, if you're not a lifelong learner, it's not worth entering because things change so dramatically. So it is those key connections that are very important.
That's great, and you really, you raise an administrative component to this, which is, when it comes to supporting mentors, it's also a matter of being able to make sure that they can do some of the background information, like, if they need to do personnel checks, or there's a whole structure behind the scenes to help mentors easily find mentees or find apprenticeships. And that leads a little bit into a question that I wanted to ask as well, which is how do you go about identifying and recruiting mentors? And maybe, Steve, you can kind of continue this line of thought a little bit and speak to that, because it seems like what you're talking about feeds into how you go about finding and recruiting mentors in the first place. Did we lose you, Steve? Well, we may have lost Steve for just a minute. Let me move on and maybe pass that question off to either Jeffrey or Randy. How do you go about identifying or recruiting the mentors that into your programs?
So, like I said earlier, for our programs, it's a little different, like you said, because we're really operating in the world of education, and so training and mentoring is really so much a part of it anyways. In 2 of our 3 programs, I didn't need to look for them because they were already on staff, and what I just needed to do was explain to them the specific needs and expectations of the apprenticeship program versus the other programs they might be involved with or the other coaching they might be delivering. In the 3rd program, where we really did have to recruit, there's a listserv in LA County, an early childhood listserv, where you just send a notice to this person and she shoots it out to literally hundreds of people around the county. So I just came up with a flyer. I explained what I was looking for. I probably got about 10 or 12 responses, and I interviewed people one-on-one, picked the 6 who I was, most confident about, and, hired them. A year into the program, it was quite clear who the better, stronger, more effective coaches were, and so as we went into year 2, we narrowed that group down from 6 to 4, and we've had those 4 people ever since. And so at this point, they've been working with the program for 3 years. They know the ins and outs of the coaching probably better than I do, really, and sort of built a team, so like I was saying before, so that they actually feel some support with each other as well.
I know what we do with our companies as well is we make mentoring a way in which the owners of the companies can determine who has leadership potential and leadership qualities. And so with regards to individuals who are seasoned, I agree with Randy, we definitely make sure that the employees who are mentors are seasoned, they know the job, and they can speak and articulate not just the requirements of the job, but the culture as well to the apprentice. And so we do make sure that that does take place. In addition, we also, again, work with companies to utilize and integrate the idea of mentoring as a professional development component of helping to promote within those individuals who have those people skills and those abilities to communicate with individuals in a training type of atmosphere. And so that has gone very, very well. And it has really, especially at our logistics company, AMS Fulfillment, it has really been an integral part of what they do as far as their promotion from within, as far as identifying individuals who can mentor and train and take the time to, again, cultivate that development piece of in terms of the relationship of getting people to buy into just not simply their job and doing the job correctly, but the company itself and seeing themselves being with that company for a long period of time. It's those kinds of qualities that we look for in someone who would be considered a mentor.
Great, thanks. And I think we also got Stephen back. So Steve, we were talking about how you go about identifying and recruiting mentors. Can you speak a little bit to that?
One of the things that I do is I rely heavily on LinkedIn. I have in the Orange County, LA, San Diego area about 2,400 contacts that are cybersecurity professionals. And I'm just not looking for mentors for the apprenticeship program. In my broader base function as the Deputy Secretary Navigator, I'm even looking at the potential adjunct faculty. One of the challenges, and it comes to my attention, or it was evident yesterday, I'm on a hiring committee for one of the colleges in my region. I'm there as a resource to help them identify potential instructors. And we're hurting in this industry. And so when I look at the mentorship opportunity, it's not just stopping there. It's potential adjuncts, and it's a great opportunity to reach out to the industry and seek support. Another thing that I'm commonly doing is for advisory committee meetings. The colleges in my region know that I'm there as a resource, not just serving as a Deputy Secretary Navigator, but a recruiter for advisory committee members. And typically those are people that I'm working with as mentors. So they may well be providing mentor service for a particular apprentice. but they're also joining advisory committees, and you know, it's a great way to do recruiting for a variety of functions.
It sounds like to find mentors, there's quite a bit of outreach and partnering that's really it's something of an ongoing process for everybody's programs. Maybe a little bit less for Randy since it's somewhat built in to the programs themselves, but it's still certainly an active and ongoing component. And would you all agree with that?
I would agree.
Yeah, most definitely. It has to be an ongoing component because a part of the apprentice learning to become a journeyman or an experienced individual within the construct of that particular organization, they grow not just professionally, but they grow emotionally and they grow attached to that company. And so that mentoring relationship evolves. But also, as we look at mentoring itself, we're learning that it also is evolving as well. And so, yeah, there's always reason to leave in some degree of flexibility within the structure of how that relationship takes place.
Great, that's great. I want to quickly pause here just to remind folks that are listening along, if you have questions along the way and you don't want to try to remember them and save them towards a little bit later in the conversation, feel free to drop them into chat and we'll make sure they get into the queue towards the end of the conversation. So I want to circle back that idea of being able to find the right mentor and it being an ongoing process. It seems like that also means that when you're recruiting mentors, you're also looking for mentors that could potentially be good matches or make good candidates for the mentees themselves. So how do you go about matching your mentors and your mentees? And do you find it challenging to find a good fit?
In our program, the biggest challenge is around language, because a lot of our folks, English is not their first language, and they're working in programs where really the dominant language is Spanish, both for them and for the children they serve. And so we did have some problems where we had a couple of mentors who were great mentors, but they didn't speak Spanish. And in some cases, that can be workable, and the apprentice is willing to kind of stretch. And in some cases, it just wasn't really workable. So the mismatch wasn't about the skill set or the sensitivity on the part of the mentor. It was really just the challenge of language. And I think if we were ever able to really scale this program, we would find that in other programs as well, not just with Spanish, but with various dialects of Chinese and, and so forth. That, when you're talking about first-generation college students and non-traditional workforce and new immigrants and all the kind of people that we're dealing with in our field, language is a major issue, and having the mentor have that capacity, it just makes everything else possible in terms of cultural competence and being able to really communicate, in a deep way, and for the apprentice to feel comfortable communicating with the mentor as well.
So it sounds like part of your search is really looking for a cultural match when you're trying to align mentors and apprentices. So are there any particular strategies that you employ in order to make those matches? Do you recruit in particular forums or venues? What have you found
I had to say before, and so I guess the strategy is simply you have to be conscious of that when you do the interviewing.
Okay, great. Jeffrey or Steve, is there anything you can speak to how you go about matching mentors and apprentices together?
Well, one of the things. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Drop them into a social setting. That's why I indicated we use ISACA and we use ISSA. I get the students to participate in those activities, and we instruct the students on the necessity to get out there and meet people at these events, and to make a natural connection, because I don't think it can be all that effective if there isn't that natural connection, or it just makes it much easier. So when you can develop a friendship between the mentor and the mentee, life is a lot simpler.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things we've tried to impress upon companies is this, that if you want to get the most out of your apprenticeship experience, you really want to make sure that the apprentices feel welcomed and that they have an individual that they can go to if they're facing challenges. And I do agree with Steve that that organic scenario needs to be the key by which you do your matching. One of the things we want to be careful of is telling someone who has not demonstrated a high level of emotional intelligence and social skills, putting them in a mentorship situation. And so one of the ways that we counsel companies is who not to make a mentor. And that's individuals who tend to be a loner, who tend to want to do their job and go home, and don't seem to, at least on the surface, demonstrate a personality level that would lend itself to engaging new employees or those who are trying to learn new skills. And so just as we look at what we do to match, we kind of look at things that we utilize in terms of not making sure people are mentors as well. So there may be someone who is really great at their job, but they're just not great in terms of being a mentor. And so even though they could be instructional, they may not be functional in terms of cultivating the kind of relationship the company wants to try to make happen. And that's the individual we would counsel against and encourage them again to go after relationship, and function will eventually find its way in terms of that whole dynamic as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it sounds like there's a little bit of a self-screening process where the mentor would potentially approach or apply to be a mentor in the first place. By even doing so is a way for mentors to say, hey, this is something I think, a challenge I'm willing to undertake or at least check out. And on top of that, it sounds like it's a matter of looking for some key indicators of perhaps, I don't know, some emotional intelligence, perhaps personality traits, those sorts of things. Are there any particular ones that for your respective programs that each of you really kind of key in for or look for? I know Randy mentioned cultural competency and language and whatnot. Are there others that you really highlight or you've seen make good mentors? It sounds like it's an ongoing process for mentors to be able to find, for programs to be able to find the right mentors that have those sorts of personal qualities that can really support an apprentice itself.
Yeah, I would say we haven't had a mentor meltdown of any kind with any of our apprentices that we're working with. And one of the things that we do really stress with companies, and we stress in terms of the apprentices, we educate the apprentice on what they can look for in a mentor as well. And so let me give you a couple of scenarios. One is where I got with the president of the company, and we went through all of the apprentices, and then we talked about individuals within the company who they wanted to promote that would eventually supervise those individuals, and said maybe we need to look at them and give them the opportunity to demonstrate that they have solid supervisory potential. And so that was a great screening opportunity that was utilized in terms of that situation, and that tended to work out pretty good. I would recommend also for those who are looking to do some screening, there are tools out there that will help them in terms of, for example, there's an EI survey that can be done. There's emotional intelligence surveys that are available. I can send those to anyone who'd be interested. There's another one called the Big 5 Personality survey that I've used, and there's one called Johari Window. Those are great opportunities to see if a person, and the Johari Window one is a really good one because it measures an individual's willingness to disclose. And that also taps into their ability to engage others. And so that's a great tool that can be used as well. And these instruments can be picked up online as well.
Fantastic, thanks. And that's great, that idea of being able to leverage employers and say, who's on the path towards some of those supervisory responsibilities. Maybe they're on the way to, if they haven't already stepped up into that role, they're on the way there. Is probably a good indicator for you as people to target. So this really leads into the next point that I wanted to ask about, which is, what do the students get from mentors that they don't get from the classroom itself? When we think about the sorts of qualities that make good mentors, it also means that we're thinking about the sorts of things that apprentices are going to get from the mentors. So what is it that you look for from the mentors? I'm sorry, what do the students get from the mentors that they don't get from the classroom in your respective programs?
I can start that out. Because things are moving so quickly and so dynamically, they're getting recent war stories. And that's really important. Having taught in the classroom for 20 years and taught cybersecurity, I can tell you that I don't have as many war stories relative to my experiences as a classroom teacher than people who are actually working day to day in the industry. And so the students, if this sort of interaction wasn't absolutely necessary, then we would have students just be in class and then they walk out and into the workforce. But the truth is that their exposure to the workforce is so critical, and this gives us the opportunity to give them that exposure earlier on in their training.
That's great, and I really love that point, that little nugget, that little soundbite of you're giving apprentices the opportunity to have relatable war stories right off the bat. There's the examples and things that you can get academically, but when you're hearing it from the person, from your mentor, from the person that's there in the proverbial trenches with you, somehow that presents an opportunity for a story to really sink in. So that's great. Jeffrey, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think also they get that street knowledge. That street knowledge which basically helps them to navigate the employment situation, which is always very, very good. And I know Steve has already alluded to that, but I just want to also bring in this idea that with that street knowledge comes the idea that the employee slash apprentice is building a very special relationship, one that generally is not found in a classroom setting, and that does have a lot of merit, that does have a lot of value, especially in advanced manufacturing, where a product goes through a series of fabrication points. Teamwork and building those relationships is very, very critical. So that street knowledge that they're getting can be huge in terms of what they normally will not get in the classroom. Another value that happens as well is that as that apprentice goes through their training, their related supplemental instruction, we look to the mentors to hold them accountable so that they're doing their work. And so that apprentice they have to be accountable to that mentor, saying, okay, this is what we're learning, this is what we're doing, as part of the overall experience as well. So it keeps them on track, which is also good.
And what I would add is two things. One is sometimes because the apprentices have very personal relationships with the mentors in a way that's different than they do with their classroom instructor, because the mentorship is one-on-one and the classroom instructor is 1 to 15 or 1 to 20. And so sometimes the apprentice will bring up questions or issues to the mentor about what's going on in the college class that they don't necessarily feel comfortable telling the instructor. So, like for instance, if there's an assignment that they really feel like, oh my God, I just can't do this, I'm going to fail this project, and they really tell the mentor what they're worried about and so forth, the mentor then comes and tells me, listen, this group got an assignment that they're all freaking out about. And then I can call the instructor and find out, and often it's not that the assignment's, really out of reach, but it's more maybe a breakdown in communication. So I find out from the instructor what's really going on. I feed the information back to the mentor. They feed the information back to the apprentices. sometimes it is a case where the apprentice really has brought to light something we needed to know about, but we just hadn't heard about it. So the mentor kind of provides this link between the classroom and the program. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, sometimes even if someone's taking a college course, and if you ask them what they're learning or how they're applying it, they would say whatever they'd say, and they would, be honest. But when the mentor sees it in practice, it's really different. And suddenly the mentor can see where the gap is between what they're learning and what they're internalizing and being able to, what's the word? Put into place, actualize, or whatever word you want to use. And so the mentor can provide that, interpretation of what they're learning in the classroom. And because they're seeing it with their own eyes in the context of the classroom, it's unmistakable. There's no gap between what they're seeing and the feedback they can give. Where again, the college instructors are at a disadvantage because they don't see them in the classroom and see what they're actually doing with the information they're getting.
That's great, and that's really speaks. Mentors aren't just a benefit for the mentees themselves, for the apprentices themselves, but also for the program. It really tightens up and allows programs to be particularly effective and know that the students that they're training, the apprentices that they're training, are going to be really top quality individuals. So I want to give an opportunity to open up the room to the audience and see if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask. We have about 10 minutes or so left, and I want to give everybody a chance to pose anything that has come up through this conversation. So, Eduardo, if you wouldn't mind opening the lines for folks, and I'd encourage folks to either type in questions into the chat box and we can read them out if you're shy or don't want to speak out, or feel free to chat if you feel so. And it looks like there's a couple of folks that may be chatting into the chat box, and so we'll let them ask those questions as they come in. I do want to ask one other question that gets a little bit specific about to folks. Looks like, let's see, lots of good notes, no questions. Okay, so let me, I do have one other little bit more specific question for the panelists today, which is, as you've inserted or developed your mentorship programs, have you needed to make any changes to the components of your program? I know this is, a lot of times it's a bit of a work in progress as we're developing our programs, we're building partnerships, we're making sure things work for employers, making sure things work for educator partners, etc. So are there any particular changes that really stand out that you've had to make along the way that have really been for the better?
Yeah, I'll start off on that one, if I may. There's always going to be changes because of the nature of how that relationship manifests itself. And so with ours, with the logistics company that we work with, we really overhauled the way in which we structured the apprenticeship. We're under the CAI grant, and once we met with the company and began looking at developing that mentorship component, that takes time. That's not something that we meet on Tuesday and we have mentors on Wednesday. That's 2 to 3 months to really take the time of meeting and vetting and talking with individuals. As a result, the related supplemental instruction and how that all gets rolled out, that all gets put on the back burner until we really make sure that we know who the apprentices really are and who the mentors really are, and that the company buys into the RSI that we're looking to present. All of that takes time. And once we build that mentoring relationship, one of the things we did was we had a couple of pizza parties for these apprentices and their mentors, just to get that social thing going, and that really was helpful. Before we talked about OJT and RSI and get into all the terminology, we just talked. And so we had a couple of social engagements and invited them to a couple of workshops that we do here at the college, and so they sent representatives over. And I believe that type of informal, cordial experience of just getting together without talking business, but just letting relationships develop was critical. And we totally put off the apprenticeship, saying, we'll do the apprenticeship, we have time, but we need to get all of this in place. And so it did put a delay in how we do the RSI and other things, but it was well worth it.
That's great. And there was a question that came in on the line. Oh, Steve, did you want to speak to that real quick, or Randy, did you want to speak to that real quick before we?
Well, yeah. Well, I just wanted to say, unfortunately, with the group that I'm with cybersecurity, there really isn't that strong connection between the company and the employee that probably exists in occupations where they're primarily unionized, and we just don't have that. And so trying to develop this alignment with companies is a bit of a challenge, and because there is a general unwillingness that I've found for companies to invest when they realize that when they get somebody trained up halfway, not completely, that they're likely to go somewhere else for the money. And that's an unfortunate aspect of it, but with companies today not providing pension plans and a variety of other things, it's just the way it is. And it's sort of a hired gun mentality relative to people that participate in this occupation. So that's why we're doing a broader based search for mentors, not necessarily tied to a company, but giving that student the experience, that connection is, in my opinion, so important. We just don't have the backing, that is to say, of companies because of the mobile workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly as apprenticeships scale into different industries as well, there may be different adaptations or workarounds that are going to need to be made in order to make it work for all the partners themselves. So it sounds like this can really vary depending upon the industry that you're in. There was a question that came in. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
No, I was going to say I can address that question that came in about how long the mentorships are.
Yeah, there was a question that came in. How long are the mentorships, and how does it compare to work experience?
So for us, the mentorship is a required part of the program. They're receiving mentoring for as long as they're receiving, as long as they're part of the program. We think of it as like a three-piece thing. They have to be in college coursework, they have to be working full time, and they have to be receiving coaching. And if they divert, or whatever that word is, from any of those three components, then they might be taking a break from the program and coming back, but they have to be doing all three in order to be part of the program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Is that similar for both you, Steve, and Jeffrey?
Well, of course, as I've mentioned earlier, we drive mentoring through the certification programs. And they have to do 40 hours. The mentors have to do 40 hours a year in order to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, we use mentoring not so much, we don't enforce so much the mandatory aspect of it, although I completely agree with Randy that it is an essential component. What we say is if you want to train employees and lessen your chance of them getting poached and make sure that you want to enhance your retention of really good people, then you need to mentor them. And so we take it from that value-added approach, saying you mentor not because we say you should, we mentor because you're investing in that employee and you don't want to lose them after investing so much time and money, and mentoring can help alleviate or eliminate to some degree that from happening.
That's great. Thank you all. So I've been taking some notes as we go along here, and I want to put forth just a couple of takeaways from our conversation today, and give the panelists an opportunity to have any wrap-up items that they wanted to say. I noticed that mentors really, they bring academic work to an apprentice's fingertips. They're a lifeline for apprentices, and they build personal professional relationships that keep workers committed to the companies that they're working with. Supporting mentors who are new, they may benefit from more formalized training, especially around strategies for interpersonal support sorts of things. It seems like a lot of mentorship programs have regular check-ins with their mentors to share experiences and address issues. Recruiting mentors is an ongoing process that requires outreach and working with partners. Matching mentors to mentees really means finding qualities in mentors that are a good fit for supporting an individual. And one effective strategy might be to speak with employers who have identified employees that are on the path to supervisory responsibilities. And apprentices get, by going through and working with mentors, they really get the opportunity to hear war stories or get street knowledge from the folks that they're working with. And learning these lessons helps them to build personal relationships that create, I would say, an emotional commitment to the profession that they're getting involved in. And in addition, the mentors themselves serve as an extra line of communication for the programs that are serving them and for the employees, I suppose, as well. Social relationships, lastly, they really take time, and so building in opportunities where possible for mentors and apprentices to spend time, even if it's outside of work, can really help facilitate those working relationships. And of course, this is a work in progress, especially in expanding industries similar to what Steve's working in with cybersecurity and tech. Are there any other lasting takeaways or parting words to the panelists that you wanted to add in that the community know about?
I think the key is not to go for perfection, but go for process and progress. Apprenticeship is a relationship building model at its core. And given all of the various compliance issues and things of that nature, that's all well and good. But what we've discovered at SWAG is that engagement is critical. Communication is critical. It is key, and that really determines a lot of the success that can come out of the apprenticeship experience. It is that engagement, both internally in terms of the company with their employees and their apprentices, and externally between organizations such as SEIU, and Steve's group, working with ICT, Information and Communications Technology, and myself. Without that relationship building component, apprenticeship is dead. The relationship building is the lifeblood. It flows through the veins of apprenticeship, and that's the most important factor in making it work.
I agree.
I agree.
Great. It sounds like that was an excellent response. So I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us today during our conversation. We have been recording our conversation, so we're going to make this webinar available for the KAI network for folks to be able to go back and listen to it if they like, or people that weren't able to join us can access it again. Jeffrey and Steve and Randy, thank you so much today for your contributions. This has been a fantastic conversation and one that is quite helpful.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
And thanks everybody else. This is the end of the webinar. We look forward to seeing you again in about a month. We'll have information out very shortly about that. Thanks so much, everyone.